Okay, everybody. So we're going to work further today on two-point perspective after going over your packets. Um, I can see that we need more work on this. And for some of you that turned in your packets, I would sort of imagine that after some of the work we do today, you may actually want to go back and redo that work before I grade it. The next thing I'll be grading is the Edward Gorey drawing. So you've got a bit of time to go ahead and get it back in. But I can see from those packets, which are, and I don't say this lightly, but in terms of perspective, most of the problems in those packets are very straightforward. And so, if we're not doing super well on that, I know then we need more time for that. So you actually, one of the reasons why you didn't have like, so to speak, like an actual drawing for homework was because as the packets started coming in, I could see that we need to spend more time on the perspective. So I thought instead I'd let y'all get the packets done, get the egg quiz done, and then get in the classwork from last week so that like we were up to date there, because I could tell that it wasn't time yet to sort of like bring in a 2-point perspective homework assignment that was like a long 10-hour drawing kind of. And so you will not really have one of those. Instead, it's going to be sort of, you're going to start to see all this stuff being incorporated in every drawing assignment after this sort of period. It's all going to start to come together. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit. I'm going to share something with you today that I'm working on as a proposal for a space. And I wanted to do this as a way to kind of like bring in, especially for those of you, we used to have really big numbers of students that were interior design students. And I don't really know if that's the case anymore. But like a lot of times students are kind of like asking like, where is the applicable and relatable logic behind learning something like linear perspective? So I thought I'd share this proposal that I'm working on with you, because to build the proposal, like to build the sketches, I have to understand 2-point perspective and I have to understand space. And I just think from sort of like, what does it look like to be a professional artist? I think it's like an interesting thing to do with my students, because so often in Western American culture, although everything that we wear, everything we drive, everything that we live in is all art, we tend to really look down heavily on art as this sort of like non-obtainable place of living. But of course, the reality is that that often is coming from, in my opinion, jealousy of people who get to do what they want to do with their lives. And art is one of those things that you can really, do that with. You can really get a chance to make an impact. But I mean, like if you pick up your phone right now, the screen interface is art. The TikToks are art, Instagram stories are art, like it's all art, right? Like it's just a matter of like changing your perception of like, does art have to just be painting and drawing? Okay. So I always try to like help students to see like art is a variable, like something which is a valid livelihood. And you can actually do cool stuff with it. So I have this performance work, which I'm proposing to do again here in Seattle. It's called Safety in Numbers. And what this performance is about really is it's about creating safety in numbers for trans people through the creation of anonymity. So like as a trans person, we haven't talked a lot about my work, but I try to, because like for some of you, you will never hear about transgender artists again. And so like to me, it's like a really valid thing to bring into the class, because like, for me, being trans and being an artist are the two most important parts of my identity. And all my museum shows I have, all the gallery shows I have, all the money I get from art, all of that I have because I'm trans and was like able to like accept who I was and to turn that into art. Nobody really cared about my art before I really started to like find myself. And that just makes sense, right? Like you can't make good, decent art if you don't know who you are. So Safety in Numbers is this performance work where my laptop's dying, I'm afraid. Sorry. So you have to see me walk through my dirty apartment. Safety in Numbers is this performance work where volunteers can come and they are offered the opportunity to get my haircut. And basically the goal is to turn people into clones of me. And so the idea being, right, that like, if I have a bunch of people around me that look like me, I can just finally for once like disappear. And so it's like a really fun performance work. You know, people come and they get their hair cut and we talk. And it's just fun, you know, but it's also got this like really serious component, which is like, you know, we're doing this for a reason, which is that trans people don't have a lot of anonymity. Okay. Now in Seattle, you know, this was done in Portland, this piece. In Seattle, this one was done in Tampa. You know, there's kind of like this push to like non-binary. I don't want to look like I belong in the binary. I don't want anonymity. Like, I don't care about the way you construct gender in society. I'm going to break that down. Like, that is a very sort of like, I mean, it's like Gwen and I were just talking. It is the way that things are moving. You know, the non-binary community in particular is growing at an extremely fast rate, right? But like for me, you know, like I'm a binary identifying trans woman. Like I want to be seen as a woman. I want to be read as a woman. I want to live my life as a woman. I have had, you know, medical intervention. I have had legal intervention. And like I'm even considering flying to England to get my birth certificate changed, in which case I have to be examined by doctors physically to ensure that it's okay for me to have my birth certificate changed, which is a whole nother sort of discussion and issue around the policing of bodies and the policing of medicine. But like, for me, that's my goal. But so like in Tampa, for instance, like, especially when I started transitioning, this is 2012, you know, I really didn't have any anonymity. Like I would walk into a restaurant and people's mouths would drop, you know. And if I was out shopping at like Target, I would have to leave the store, get in my car, drive home in order to use the bathroom legally. And in Florida, it's still currently not legal to use the bathroom with which you identify in terms of like your gender. Now it's a bit different here in Seattle, right? Like Seattle's a bit more open. Seattle's a bit more aware of the differences in the gender community, as is Portland. Like in Portland, we had a lot of a larger volunteer base that came to help support the trans community. And anonymity in Portland may be making sure that you don't look like you're in the binary, you know what I mean? And so each place that we do the performance has a different sort of like flavor to it in that sense. So the goal is to basically have volunteers agree to physically change their appearance as a way to show solidarity with the trans community. And that's kind of a big ask, you know, like I'm asking you to do more than just performative activism on Instagram. I'm asking you to literally change how you look in order to align yourself with this community. And, you know, obviously, you know, this has got a lot to do with like these larger issues of like safety, acceptance, you know, diversification of society, et cetera, et cetera. So, you know, in terms of like the idea of safety, like especially somewhere like here in Seattle, you know, I'm going to be really safe because I'm a white trans woman. I'm highly educated. I'm lower middle class. You know, like people know who I am. Like just the other day, I was in a makeup shop and someone came up to me and started talking to me because they recognized my, I guess, my eyebrows and my eye. I don't know like how they recognized me, but like they did. And so like I have that sort of level of anonymity, excuse me, that level of protection, okay? And the reality, of course, for someone like me, that the more I actually am visible, the less, you know, even though I have all this privilege, like the less like safe I am. So like having to remove all the comments off my TEDx talk online because of all the death threats and things like that. Like, so the more I actually am visible, you know, the less, you know, the more my privilege layers kind of like are not providing that same level of protection. But in terms of like general society, I'm really a privileged trans person, right? I'm 45. I have a job. I have insurance. I'm white. I'm educated, you know, et cetera, right? So the safety aspect like is a little bit different here than like in Tampa when I was younger and I didn't have a full-time job. And like also the other thing too being that like Tampa is Tampa, Seattle is Seattle, Portland is Portland. So what's really interesting for me as a trans person, right, like about something like this is that like I actually get misgendered a lot here in Seattle because gender can be read in lots of different ways. So because gender is more flexible in Seattle, I get misgendered by people like at the store, I get misgendered by people like in my social life, I get, you know, if someone's first time they're meeting me. Because gender in Seattle can be very flexible. Now, if I go home to Florida these days, I'm generally read as a woman, I'm generally read within the binary, and I'm generally never misgendered. So it's kind of like this interesting like issue, right? However, my mom who has dementia, you know, we are hoping to move her to her sister's in Alabama and Arkansas, sorry, and I was going to drive her and I don't really feel safe doing that. So like every region is different. And so this performance has been done in different regions. You'll notice that in both of the performances, like here I use stripes and here I use dots. And so like in both, this is all hand printed paper. So each one of these is 5 runs of color, silkscreen color with hand painting. Took forever to build all of this for this space. So like this was meant to be kind of like when you look at it and you get close and it's in your periphery, it starts to vibrate. And then the stripes, like in the striped space, you know, we laid a striped floor, we put up stripes on the walls, everyone wore stripes, and then with all the mirrors up, it got really disorientating because of all those stripes. And that speaks to about like the sort of like the types of disorientation you experience as a trans person. So I'm about to do this project here, I'm proposing to do this project here. And the space that has asked me to do this piece wrote, you know, like reached out to me, which is something that's kind of new in my career, which is that like curators and directors of spaces write to me rather than me trying to find a show. And that's kind of like an amazing thing. Like the show I'm in right now at the Block Museum in Chicago, like they wrote to me and asked me to be in the show. They commissioned the work and like, that's amazing. That's like every artist's dream, you know? And so this space, the person that runs this space, the director, wrote to me and said, hey, look, we have this space and we're kind of interested in maybe you thinking about coming to do something here. And so what I proposed is another safety in numbers. The hairstyle that people will be getting, and they can only get one hairstyle. It's not like you can come and just do whatever you want. And in the past, I've been more flexible, but this time I think I'm going to be very strict. Is going to be like kind of like a classic bob. In the past, I've done like an A-line bob. And the bob is really symbolic because of the relationship of bob to the hair of women. And how, you know, in terms of the independence of women is related, you know, how that kind of correlates with this time period where suddenly like women were cutting their hair short. And one day I'll give you a whole lecture on hair because it's one of my favorite subjects and how it's used to control people and things, but that's another conversation in a way. So they just sent me this thing and I'd never seen one of these before, but this is something, I can't remember what it's called, it's got a certain name, a Matterport. Now I was really excited because it had a little cassette tape down here and I thought they had made me a mixtape, but they haven't. This is for VR, which is kind of really cool. And so they sent this thing to me, and I'm sure some of you have seen these before. And so, you know, my sassy self is wondering why they haven't fixed the ceiling. But that's just me being sassy. You know, I know the ceiling's there. So then you go inside, whatever. Now, I've been to the space. This is Mad Art, which is over in Soto. And I took some of my own pictures, but they sent this to me, right? And like, what's cool is like you can measure distances. So like, I don't really know how to use this. I'm just gonna like move things around and see what happens. But like apparently, right, like you can measure a distance and whatever, I don't know. Somebody here knows, oh, here we go. Click anywhere to add points to draw lines. Okay, so there to there, right? So like this is a space I'm going to use. So it's 11 foot 9 inches. And then it's basically 11 feet high. So like this is the space I'm going to be working in particular to start with. This will be one of the performance spaces. Like if we look at this, so like that's kind of like the technology that they've presented to me is like this, so I can measure that space and figure it all out, which is kind of amazing, right? Like I think this is amazing. You may not, because you may be really young and think, yeah, I can do this on Discord all the time. And so like as an artist, like my job is to like figure out like how does this, how can I utilize this space in such a way that like they're going to be like super excited. And also I have to think about the flow of like the foot traffic. I have to think about COVID. I have to think about all these different aspects of like how to create a functioning space within this space that they presented to me. Now, would I do all this work without a budget? When I was younger. These days, this space actually has an amazing budget for artists. So that's one of the reasons why it's like totally worth it for me to figure out every aspect and component for this. So this is like one of the things that they sent me. Now, the other thing that I've done in order to prepare, and this is where I wanted to show you like the 2-point perspective stuff and how I've just used it, is I went there with the director and took some photographs. And so this is what I built, okay? So the photograph that I took was basically just that little wall I showed you, which is currently just like that 12 foot by 12 foot space. That's just one iron pillar and another iron pillar. And so then what I'm going to do is build like a wall here, and then I either get an inkjet printed fabric or inkjet printed wallpaper and create a space like I do for my Project 42 stuff. And just as a plug, if you haven't gone to see my exhibition at Bainbridge Island Museum of Art, I have a solo exhibition there. It's 21 garments. If you haven't gone to see that, it closes February 23rd. So you should go see it. That project will not be put back together again in such a large quantity, probably until I get to the finish of the project, which is 42. And that may be like 5 years or 10 years before I do that. So, jump on the ferry and go over and see it is what I say. If you look in your syllabus, there's extra credit in there. Could be a great thing to go see for extra credit, and you don't have to like the show, you just have to go to it. So when I took the photograph, right, like first thing I had to do was pop it into Photoshop and take away the bend, because as always, I took it with a camera phone. And as I've described in the past, that means that the lens is wide and so it buckles, right? Because it's a wide angled lens. So I had to pop it into Photoshop and boop, make all of my vertical lines vertical and to make sure that the image itself wasn't bowed, okay? So after doing that, then I just sort of like outlined the space, easy peasy, there's already columns there. Well, that was all the easy stuff. The next thing I had to figure out was like, okay, where are the vanishing points so that I can put on like a faux floor so they can see like what this thing is going to look like on the floor. Okay, this is really rough, y'all. Don't trust me. This is not like this is not how I succeed in art. But I want to show you. After doing that, well, then I went online and I got a picture of this chair. And now the chair was 1-point perspective, like facing me. So I put it into the space, and then I had to use what I'd already established by finding the vanishing points and distort the chair so that it was running in line with the floor and the wall. Then the same thing I did for the mirror. I went out to Home Depot, I found a mirror, and then the mirror is 1-point perspective. So I dropped the mirror in there and then distorted the mirror until its perspective matched the chair. And so now the mirror and the chair and the floor are running pretty much in the same perspective. In order to do all that work, I have to know how to draw a box in space. Because without drawing the box, I don't know, I can't figure out kind of like where my vanishing points are. So the practicality of this for me is like really evident here. The practicality of learning 2-point perspective is very evident here for me, because like I couldn't build this space digitally if I didn't have a knowledge of how to draw a box in space by hand. And so like the budget, you know, let's just like talk about this from an art point of view, because I believe like as an artist, like in being transparent about these things, you know, I'm going to ask for $10,000 budget. So like this will be up for like 3 weeks. And so like half of that will go to materials, or a third of that will go to materials or something. But like it's worthwhile for me to like build all this stuff because the budget is so large. And the primary like thing that I'm using here to construct all of this visual language that I'm doing to try to get that money and the opportunity is 2-point perspective. As an instructor, I just think like just as much as I like my students to see me fail, I also think it's really exciting for students to understand that there is possibility and opportunity in art, you know, to be successful. And so most of the time we have our eyes set on like that blue chip level of artists. Like when I worked as a production assistant, Christian Marclay was a world-renowned artist, he still is. We made prints for him. Each piece of paper was worth $60,000. And he would come and he'd spend 4 days in the studio and make 50. And then he would edit that down to 20 or 25. And each one is worth 60 grand. And so like there's that level of art, you know, and then there's, you know, Kerry James Marshall, who's an African-American Black painter who probably gets $1-2 million a painting, you know, and then there's like my level, right, which is like a much lower, much more middle space. What's awesome is I'm sharing with both those artists right now, so that's why I picked them. It's totally true what I just said. Both of those artists are like extremely amazing artists, and I will never ever reach their level, but there's a chance that I can find a way to create a sustainable practice. And by doing so, you know, live my life the way I want to live my life in the arts. And I think that's awesome, and what you should all be, not that you all have to live your life in the arts, but I want you to sort of think a lot as you move forward with your education, like, what is the thing that I really want to do? Because you'll be way more successful and way more happy when you're investigating that which you are excited by. So that's all my discussion wrapped up all in one right there for you. And I'm sorry, I know that that's a lot of babbling, and for some of you that may not matter, you know. Thanks, Gwen. But for some of you, you know, maybe that sparks an interest in like, maybe not in art, but maybe that sparks an interest in like molecular chemistry. I have a friend, she's one of, I think, one of the top transgender academics in the world. She's teaching in Utrecht right now, and she's so smart and just so brilliant. And her doctorate is in coral. So she got her PhD in coral, like she worked with coral and growing coral and studying coral. And so it probably has a very specific name, her PhD. But now she's this renowned writer about aesthetics and experience and sensation. And so like, you know, how your pathway leads, I think is super exciting. And I just want to endorse for you that education is an extremely worthwhile and extremely valuable part of how you create your future. Not just monetarily, like we have such a focus on money, you know. How else can you be successful? And that's one of the big questions I have as an artist. Okay, that was my babbling. Let's get to work with visual art, Vaughn, visual art. One of the things I tell students, you know, who are art students when we talk about success is like, if you want to know what success is, like, it's basically living your life as an artist. And I tell them, like, if you go pick up an art magazine from the 80s and you look on the front cover, of that magazine, the chances are you will not know who that person is because they've come and they've gone. The same thing with musicians, you know, like what's cool right now with TikTok is like everyone remixing all these songs from my youth. It makes me feel young and old simultaneously. Yeah. But like suddenly all these songs I grew up listening to are like remixed into these TikTok songs. And like it's blows my mind that when I used to listen to the Beatles in the 90s, and I fell in love with the Beatles because my parents listened to the Beatles when they were young, which was in the 60s, right? When I listened to the Beatles in the 90s, my parents' records, which I still have, it was the same as when right now somebody today is listening to music from the 90s, and that just blows my mind because my parents were just so freaking old. And don't worry, if you're lucky, your time will come, right? Like that's what I always think about aging, is that those of us that get to age are the ones that, you know, it's lucky we age. Our society is so messed up the way we view aging. Okay, here we go. So grab a piece of paper and a pencil and grab your ruler. We're going to go over some of the 2-point stuff that I see students struggling with in the packets. And then today, if we have time to start with value, we will. If not, then we'll just pick up with the value on Wednesday. And just to clarify, I firmly believe that everything I just said to you and that hour-long speech was really important. And I hope that you recognize that too. Okay, so I'm going to grab my iPad, grab your pencil, grab your paper. Thanks, Gwen. Okay, everybody, so we're just going to cover some of the things I see as kind of not working in the packet. So let's go ahead and start the same way we always do. We're just going to divide our space up in half. What just happens there? Oh, I think I picked the same color as the background. That's not going to work. All value is relative on. You can't do that. No, it's still not there. Oh, it's locked. That's why. Now, this should just be second nature to you by now. And then go ahead and just, you know, establish your space to work within. It doesn't have to be perfect, you know, as always. It just has to be a space which, like, you know that if you work within that space, you're not going to create like intense distortions as a result. Okay. So let's go ahead and I'm going to put a vanishing point over here. And I'm going to put one here. So kind of close to the center there, one further away. It doesn't have to be perfect. Just find something similar. Okay. One thing I will say about the notes that y'all are turning in is that like some of them, you know, I haven't really started to like take off points if you don't have all of the notes. But, you know, if we spend half the class on a drawing and you don't do that drawing, you know, you're not participating in half the class. So make sure you're following along for all the drawings and you turn all of them in. They do work better for me when I'm grading when they are just individual JPEGs up, embedded in one reply to the discussion rather than a PDF or a doc or something that I have to download to grade. So I appreciate when they're just embedded JPEGs. Okay, so one of the things that I noticed was like, let's talk a little bit about, let's just start off first here with like the fenced in area. So we're going to create our own little fenced in area here. It's going to be different from on the one on your, you know, on your packet, but we're going to cover like the principle. So let's just go ahead and we have like we know that that fence is below the eye level because we see inside of it. So let's go ahead and establish our corner down there and then connect those corners to the vanishing point. Okay. Now it's a pretty squared off area, so let's go ahead and just sort of give ourselves like the idea that, you know, maybe this is a squared off area. So the left side should be shorter than the right side because the left side is closer to the left vanishing point. The right side is longer. I've drawn a perfect cube. Doesn't look much like a fence yet, does it? But that's the whole point, is that like the fenced in area is just basically a cube or a rectangle in space. Okay. Now, this bottom one's going to go there. This bottom one's going to go there. And then where they intersect will be a vertical. So don't forget, vertical equals vertical, horizontal equals horizontal, orthogonal equals orthogonal. Oh my goodness, wrong. You were so wrong. Get it right, Vaughn. Vertical is vertical. Orthogonal is orthogonal. So we don't have any horizontals. Just like that. Now, the thing that's happening on the fence that I'm seeing with students is this. And this might be just like a time thing. It might be just, say you're running out of time or whatever. I don't know. I don't always know what's happening. So what we want to remember is that if I divide this space, let's just divide this in half there. And let's divide this in half here. Whoopsie, just off a little bit there. Okay. And we find the center and that center. Okay. So all we did was find those two centers. So go ahead and do that. Okay, now this is the part where we're not quite getting everything in. If we then take this space, right, and we say, all right, we now know that this moment is the center of this side of the fence. Okay. And now we know that this side here is the center, or this point here is the center of this side of the fence. Well, then when we draw the center here and we draw the center there, we know exactly where they should fall in space. Because if I take this point here to that point there, and this point here to that point there, this point here to that point there, this point here to that point there, right? I now know where this goes and where this goes. A little bit off there, Vaughn. So let's clarify that. So if you're using your paper and pencil, which is fine, or if you're online, going digital, whatever, any process you're using, if you're using pencil and paper, that is no problem. Just, do what we've been doing where you're lightly erasing. But let's just identify now the lines that we need to keep. And so basically what we should have at this moment is we should have a good understanding of where the center of these spaces are. The left side of the fence and the right side of the fence. Now I'm purposely just drawing what I need. I'm not drawing parts I don't. That is a dreadful line there, Vaughn. Failed. Way to go, even worse. But you get the point. Do it properly, Vaughn. Do it properly. I just get so excited to draw. Goes there. That goes there. Be a good girl. Okay. So what this means and what we want to make sure that we understand is that the bottom of the center of the fence here lines up with the bottom here, and that this bottom here lines up with that bottom there. And so then, if we took that and then we divided this space in half as well, found the center. Well, now we can take that and we can find exactly in this, and we can find exactly where it falls down here to create that rung of the fence. And then we can divide this and find this to figure out where that one falls. Now, again, this is linear perspective. So that means basically we are forcing the perspective to do what we need it to do. Not necessarily the idea that this would be the fence that you built on the weekend after maybe just a few too many, Budweisers. Okay. I picked Budweiser on purpose because in the South, people drink light beer like that because it's hot. That's just what it makes me think of. People building fences in the South. And that's just because I spent most of my life in the South. So you see, we can find the correlations and the exact locations of things based on how we divide the space. That's why I spent so much time with you learning how to divide the space, because then once you know how to divide the space, you know how to build the slats in the fence. And so now you know that the fence has a slat here, and the fence has a slat here, and the fence has a slat here, and the fence has a slat here. If you do it correctly, it's going to diminish in size the way that it needs to based on, the measurements that you created. Then if the fence has a thickness, you also would just, go back to where your vanishing points are. And use that to establish where your thickness would be. And now you have the thickness of each plank. Make sure that this point here would go back to there, giving you the thickness here. So if your fence that you drew, like your fenced-in area on your handout that you drew, if it doesn't have equal slats on the front and the back sides, then you didn't follow the sort of like the method of establishing the front and the back spaces within the within like the perspective. Sorry. Okay. Okay. Here's another thing to talk about. Also, real fast, let's talk about this too, because this was a puzzler for a lot of people too. So I'm just going to remove all of this. And remember, that was all 2-point perspective. One of the things that was really difficult for everybody in the 1-point perspective packet were the stars. And I'm just going to draw this, and I'm going to show you. I'm actually going to turn on this cool tool that this has, which is a 1-point perspective tool. Okay, and you can kind of see it has these like bright blue lines in it. Okay, now I just want to show you because I want this to go fast because we've already done 1-point perspective, but a lot of people struggled on this, which was this idea that the stars. Okay, so I wish I had a star, like a pre-stamped star here. I don't, but I could use this to help me establish a star. Okay, so let's just pull this apart real fast and just make sure that it functions as the way it should do to create the star. So I'm just going to create like an even star here using what we already kind of know about perspective. Okay. And so I'm just going to divide this space up so I can kind of like figure out where I want the star to be. Okay, and so then, let's just pull this and divide this again here. I'm going to divide this again here. Okay, and then I'm going to divide this to this, and then that's going to give me this. Okay, and then I'm going to divide this, and I'm going to divide this, and I'm going to divide this, and I'm going to divide this. And I'm just basically like figuring out where I want my star to interact here with these areas. Okay. So something like this. No, like here to here to here. You don't have to do this. I'm just drawing a star for us. To here to here. Let's see. To here to here to here. Not perfect, but that's all right. Just needs to go up higher, I think. Like that. Okay. Okay. Not the best star, but it's there. Now, turned on my 1-point grid. Now watch what happens. This is cool. This is why I used to love doing this app with all my students. Every line that I draw now will automatically go to the vanishing point, and I don't have to like really worry about if I get the line off. It's just always going to go to the vanishing point. So you can see when we do this, right, that some of these lines, like this line inside here, if I pick a different color and I put this in here, boy. Okay, so that's going to get hidden, right? Because it's like kind of inside the star, right? So then if we look at this and think about this, actually, this is kind of a nice moment right here where this line there is going through the other line there. That's kind of a nice moment. Everyone seemed to be able to do that pretty well, but where everyone got stuck was on the thickness. So here's the thing. If I put the thickness down and it comes and it goes to here, well, then that means that it's going to interact from there to there. And then what you want it to do, right, is like you want this line, this angle to echo that angle. And then look, once you've established kind of like that, then you can use your ruler to come over as a straight horizontal line to establish where it would interact with to here. And then those are going to be the same thickness. Okay. And so because you found this thickness here, now you can find that thickness there. Okay. And so then here you can follow this all the way up here, and where it interacts at the top there, now you know that that's the right angle as well, the right thickness. And so, right, our goal is to establish these thicknesses so that the idea of the front of the star is echoed in the back of the star. Do you see? And that echoing is exactly what we need to draw any type of geometric object in perspective. So like here, it'd be 1-point perspective, but it could very well be 2-point perspective. Okay. And so then what's important here is recognizing that basically what you're telling the view is that the back that you cannot see is equal to the front that you can. Okay. All right, let's go back to the 2-point perspective. I just thought that that was really important with you all to cover. Okay, so let's go back to the 2-point perspective. And let's look at the S, because the S seemed to really cause a lot of problems for everybody in the packet. Okay, so let's just go ahead, just like we've been doing. Let's establish our corner to corner. And now you see, I just do this with you all the time, kind of nonstop, and it's probably really annoying. And you're probably really over it. But later on, when I tell you you can't sketch or find the center, you're going to get really upset at me and say, but we always find the center. And say, but you can't. You have to find the center through gesture and feeling it. Then you're going to like me even less. Okay, so now we have this, right? And we're going to work within that space. That should all seem and feel pretty normal to you now. Now, if I remember correctly, for the S, we have something that's kind of like here, right? And something that's kind of like here. And then it just gives us like this. I believe. It's just like, here's one part and here's the other part. So the very first thing to do there would be to go ahead and begin the process. What I would do, and since I'm your teacher, that means I'm right. Well, I might be kind of right. I'm definitely not infallible. But what I would do, what I think would be the easiest thing to do, maybe you do something differently, but what I would do is this. I would actually begin by establishing, and that's not very visible, Vaughn. What are you doing? There we go. Go ahead and begin by building first a rectangle in space. Decide how wide it's going to be. Like how tall is an S to its width. And go ahead and give it its thickness. It's just a rectangle in space. Easy peasy. Okay. Now, once you've done that, the next thing to do is to start to think about the way in which the S exists. And the way that I would do that is like, I would actually begin by just making the S like super blocky. You know, like I wouldn't worry about the S being like this gorgeous curved form, you know. And one of the things I'm going to do, y'all, because I'm dyslexic and I'm just like this, is I'm actually going to put an S at the top here, so I can kind of see, like, make sure I'm following, you know, the protocol of how to make an S. Okay. In this case, a blocky S. So it's going to start like this. That's how we're going to start it. Okay. So to do this, we're going to take, I'm going to just take your ruler, take your pencil. We're going to say, well, that's going to be like the thickness there. That'll be the thickness there. Okay, that will be the thickness to there. The thickness to there. Okay. Now you can draw a line here all the way down. And then let's find this space. Okay, and then pull this down through here like that. And then let's find this space here. Go up through here, pull down through there. Then think about this distance here. Okay, so this is closer to the left side. It's further to the right side. So if this is going to be the thickness of like the letter, we want to make sure that we're getting at least that on this side. And I'm just feeling that, like how far is that and how far does that feel? And that's going to be a straight line. Put it where you think it needs to go. And now this one over here, we're going to do this bit here, or like this bit. That's going to be smaller than this bit because it's further away. Feels pretty good on that line there. So go ahead and erase the bits you don't need. I'm going to redraw the bits that I want to keep. You can erase the bits you don't need. So you need this, need that, need that, we need that. We need this, we need this, we need that, we need that, we need this, we need this, we need that, we need this, we need that, we need this, we need boop, 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 that. Hopefully you can start to see now where we're going to. Just going to erase that because that was not a very good line, Vaughn. Okay. Now, what we need now is I'm going to go here. I'm going to pull from, I'm going to just, you do this lightly. Okay. I'm going to pull from this point here. You probably also have a ruler too, which means you don't have to draw the whole line. I'm just going to show you. That goes all the way down there, right? Because like we can see inside there. And then this goes all the way down in there because we can see inside that top bit there. So there's the sort of hard edge S. But we're not done yet. As much as maybe you'd like to be. I mean, you could be if you're doing like Russian constructivist text, which if you take my design class, you would learn about. But we're not, we're not to the point where it now feels like what we think of as an S, right? Like S is, there's a rounded. This is not rounded. But it's definitely, like I said, if you're doing like a Russian constructivist sans serif sort of like mechanical S, this feels like that. But I'm not happy. So let's figure this out. Like, how do we round it? Well, there's the good old fashioned just round it. Totally do that. Or we can go back to this idea that we had. And we can say, all right, Vaughn, this is really super confusing. Don't make me go back to this. And we say, all right, well, that's right. Maybe you do like it better like that, but it's just not going to help us. I see us needing to do some more divisions. So let's just do some more divisions. Okay, I think it's the way to go. So erase, you can erase all the other lines that you've done so far because you don't need them. But we're not done. We're going to have to do some more divisions here. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and we need to think about, okay, like, well, if we're going to round this thing, how are we going to round it? Right? Like how's that going to look? So my suggestion is that we start off by actually creating like angles and then rounding through the angles. And so if we find the center of this spot here, and then we find the center of this spot here, you can say, well, that's looking okay. Okay, well, let's see if we find the center here. We find the center here, and we pull a line through there. Is that going to help us? Okay, that's starting to help me, see how this could be rounded. Let's do the same thing down here, corner to corner. That's basically the horizontal half, right? Corner to corner. Okay, starting to make some sense. Now I know I'm like doing digitally and it's a little bit of a cheat, but that's okay. At least you can see it when I'm doing it versus like my hand on top of it or something. So if I just decide, okay, like, all right, Vaughn, like, how's that going to help us? What does that mean? Well, what we basically want to do is I'm just going to sketch this in so you can see. We want to find like an angle, right? Like that we can like cut off that corner with and be like, boop, you're done. You're out of here. But how do we do that in a way that's measurable? That's the question. And so like that looks like a pretty good location, but let's see if we can't do our good old fashioned sort of division of space kind of thing. So divide this space here vertically, divide it in half vertically. Okay, what does that give me? Well, that would give me a line like this. If I squint my eyes at that to kind of like help me see the form, is that going to function? Well, let's see. If I do this, like, would that function as a better curve? Yeah, I think so. So what we would look at then is like, okay, so I'm going to put in an angle from here to here, here to here. How do I know what that angle is? Well, you've already got the two measurements of your angle. You've got this line and you've got this axis. You got the two orthogonals and you got the axis, the vertical axis. So that would tell you that we would have a curve like that. Okay. So then this would go from here to here because we're going to cut that bit off. And this would go from here to here. Okay. Now we need another line too now, because now we need a line from here to here. And then we're going to mimic that angle there to there. And so then you're all probably saying, well, bloody hell, why don't we just draw the S and walk away? Well, we could do, but that's not what we're trying to do, right? Like we're trying to figure out like how to actually make this a believable space. Okay. Now, I think one of the things that we need to do now too is we actually now need to check to make sure that we don't need a line from here to here. Oh, it's really close, just a little bit, you see? And so then from here to here, technically we'd be looking at, that would come up here through here and tell us that we need a line there, right? And that line would be the angle from here to here. Little tiny sliver of a space. Now here, we're just going to draw a line straight down from here, boop, like that. Okay. And then we turn this on. Well, now we've already got the location of that angle there. And then this comes through up through here. And then that's going to come through here. Same thing that we established down here, right? Is that now we need to go and say, okay, well, is there a line? Whoops. Is there a line now that goes up through here? Okay. And if we pull this down here, now we can say, okay, well, that space there, you see that angle there. And now we know why we like computers. So now we have this edge here. 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 We don't need this. Do you see what we're doing? So what we're doing, right, is like we are taking apart this hard edge angle of like the rectangle, pulling that apart to help us to understand how we could use the beginning of that hard edge rectangle to help us to locate and discover and find where these curves exist. Because if you just guess, well, you end up gonna, you're not gonna have a good letter in space if you just guess. It's gonna read off no matter what you do. You have to figure it out, unfortunately. So like we're starting to get this, you see, and it's starting to make us feel like now this has the possibility of being curved. Did I imagine all of you being able to do all this like exactly like this in your packet? Nah. That's not what the packet's about, right? The packet's about looking at problems and figuring out to the best of your ability at that time. But I do want to show you the right way to do this so that you know what the right way to do this is, obviously, because that's why we're here. So let's just wrap this up real fast so that you can see it wrapped up. So now we've created some new spaces. Oh, we're not going to be able to see that color wrong. There we go. So now look, we want to take an orthogonal from here all the way down to there because like we've created that new space underneath that we can see. So we just want to keep this line here. The other ones are going to disappear. Now here, we would just use the same process to capture that lower angle, straight line there. Now again, we're picking up that straight line because it goes up through here, which goes all the way up through there. So once we found that one division, we found all of the divisions for that entire edge, right? Like, so all we needed to do was find that one division, and then all the other ones were found as well. And that's what's cool about linear perspective, is that, like, because everything lines up so well, if you find one thing, then chances are you found another thing that you need. Make sure I'm doing this the right way. So it's going to come down. Now, where that comes down like that, then that's going to come over. That's going to come like this, and that will come like this, and that will line up there. So now we just need this line here, we need this line here, and then this line here. And this line here. Everything is lining up in such a way that, like, again, once you've established one location of something, you generally don't have to establish the other one. Now this line here now has to change because we shortened that a little bit. Now, hopefully that's kind of like making sense. You know, you're kind of starting to feel how that could work. Bloody hell. Boy, I'm just going to use the ruler. There we go. Okay, so then to find the front curve, so the front part of the letter, you would just basically take what you've already established. Okay, and then just pull from the points that you've already established and to the vanishing points on each side, and that will help to guide you to their locations. So for example, here you'd pull from here to here, right? Here to here, here to here, here to here. Okay, and that's going to help you to start to see where this point here is located here. All right. So then when you go to find the angles to cut off with, then we would go back all the way back to like here and use this to help us to establish our space. So if this was our space, okay. Okay. So then half and half, right? Right through there, half and half, right through there. Okay. And so then we would have the opportunity then to say, okay, well, then there could very well be this angle is from here to here. And then this one is going to come, this vertical is going to go all the way down through here, like that. So then this angle is going to be this line here, which correlates to this line here. So like that. And then here we have this. Let me just copy this. 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 So now we're starting to see how we would have this. So that would be to there. That. Okay, now it's still kind of boxy, so then the last step would be maybe to like round that out. But now when you do that rounding out, you do that freehand, you've got all of that space that you figured out to help guide you to create a more round, more accurate curving. Oops, curving. Form. And that looks like the S from a 1970s political cartoon like Schoolhouse Rock. I'm a bill. Before I become a bill, before I become a law, I have to be voted on. The way this works is the divided Senate will wait for the vice president to be the tie because no one can agree on anything. Sorry, it's a little bit of a pessimistic view of contemporary politics. Right? And so then you just kind of like clean it up. Maybe you like it better when it's all hard edge. I don't know. It's up to you. So then you could go back to your viewpoint here, boop, right? And then that would help you to create the other side of your S. trying to mimic the curves you already created based on all the angles that you drew. So that would be an S and 2-point perspective. With curves, and then, you know, to make it look more real, we would probably add value. Maybe in here, look like that. I don't know why that got so dark, but anyway, you see the point. Do it this way. It's dark. And then as it curves around, it gets less quantified. Okay. A lot of work for an S, right? I agree. But that's you know, that would be the way to draw it correctly. Okay, so let's just finish up with just like a cylinder with a handle. I think is something we should do. Okay, so hopefully that kind of helps. And like I was saying to the students here, you know, like I don't think most people who are really good and really knowledgeable about drawing would go through that process to make an S like this. We kind of understand, you know, how it's constructed, but that is the correct way to construct something like this. And so you can see how complicated it can be. In essence, simply in the end, to just be a guide, you know, to help guide you in your curves. But, you know, when I've taught students who went to design school, even in the 80s and 90s, they had to design all of their typography by hand. And so they had to make their font with compasses and rulers. And so like, I taught students who knew how to do brilliant typography because they learned how to do it by hand. And I think one of the nicest things one of those students ever said to me was that I was just as hard as a design teacher as their design teacher had been in the 70s. And I thought that was a lovely thing to have someone say to me. And if you're, you know, not a teacher, that may seem cruel, but as a teacher, it's something which is, you know, was quite meaningful really for me. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep that on the layer. And I'm just going to take that. I'm just going to delete all this. Oh no, not all of it, because I need the lines. Okay. So go ahead and redefine your space. Okay, and we're going to draw we're just going to draw a mug with a handle. Okay, now this isn't in the packet, but it's something which comes up. Okay, so this will be the last sort of perspective thing for the day, and then I'm going to start talking to you about like the egg drawings and the first step in your egg drawings. Okay. So what you're going to do first here is we're going to start now. Remember that if you have an ellipse, you can always draw an ellipse in 1-point perspective, that you don't need to draw an ellipse in 2-point perspective unless it has something like a handle or even something like a label with writing on it. If it has writing on it, then you would probably need 2-point perspective for that. So with the handle, we need to understand the predominant part of the perspective that we need to understand, since the ellipses can all be done in 1-point, is the handle. Like that's the part that has to be done in 2-point, because it's rectilinear, right? Like it's a rectangle, and it's not just a rectangle, but it's a rectangle that is stuck to a cylinder. So we'll just keep the same vanishing points, or if you're following along and doing your own notes, just something similar. It doesn't have to be extremely exact to what I'm drawing, just so that I can see that you have 2 vanishing points. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to start off by picking a location for our mug with a handle. Now I want to keep it pretty close to the horizon line because I don't want a ton of distortion. But then again, I also want it big enough that you can see it. So I think if I go here, I should be okay. Okay, so from that corner there, I'm just literally going to draw a vertical line. It'd be better if I don't use the eraser. Maybe I should do this. And we want some, let's see, let's make it like that. No, y'all, let's not make it quite so tall. Let's make it, we want it to be below the horizon line like that. Let's do that. That'll be easier for y'all. Okay, so it looks like that. This center line has got to go because it's really bad long. Okay, so here's my vertical line for my edge, for my corner. Remember, it's a 2-point, so it always has a corner. Okay, and then I'm going to draw from the top of the corner to the back vanishing point, and from the bottom of the corner to that vanishing point. And then same thing over here, and same thing over here. Okay, so we're going to start off with a rectangle. Now the left side is longer, the right side is shorter because the right side is closer to the vanishing point. So go ahead and let's think about a mug, right? Like generally a mug is going to be taller than wider. And so then just close off the space. We're going to be able to see some of the top. Okay, the back corner is kind of hiding in front of the front corner or behind the front corner there. So. Okay, divide your space the way we've been dividing our spaces. Look at that. That's really annoying, but it's going to be helpful, but it's not going to be helpful. You know how it goes, one of those things. It's like one of my lessons. It's going to be helpful, but it's not going to be helpful. Okay, and then from this corner to there, just like we've been doing, create the old Union Jack. And my screen is frozen. Frozen when you are screen sharing important things. Ooh, my screen share just froze. Ooh, if you have a TikTok, you knows. Ooh, the remix of Madonna. Ooh, did you all know that was Madonna? Okay, here we go. So we've divided the center of, we found the bottom of the center of the bottom of this square. Okay. Now, corner to corner here and here, here and here, here and here. Okay. Now, we're just gonna eye the last little bit here. We're gonna go, okay, so about half of the space. About half of this space. And pull that all the way back to here. Pull that all the way back to here. And we get a division here. And we get a division there. Oh, what am I doing? Vaughn, does that right? Yes, that was right. Okay. Okay, so now we know kind of like the general placement of where we're going to be taking our ovals. Okay, now remember, ovals do not come to points, so they're not going to come to this point here, right? That's not where they're going. It's not going to come to there because that would not be correct. So start like a little bit. You can draw your lines too if you want. I mean, it makes sense too. We're doing it. We're supposed to be doing it the right way, Vaughn. So say we do like there to there. Okay, and then this side be a bit smaller. Okay. Now, of course, as we go to the vanishing points, I'm just eyeing them because I kind of just need them as markers right now.
I think the screen froze again.
Again? Oh, you're going to have to make me, I'm going to sing again. Oh, I won't sing again, everybody. How's that? We did pretty well there. We went for like 2 hours without it freezing. Thanks for letting me know. See, this is why I need students here because I would never know. Okay, now what I'm gonna do is just kind of do our curvy wurvy bendy wendy, right? Like that we've been practicing. And so I just turned my screen, y'all, so that I have a better ergonomic placement to draw the curves. Because remember, it's always easier to pull down than push up. And because I'm right-handed, I want to be able to I want to be able to think about how I'm forcing the trajectory of my curve through the space. So if you're left-handed, then I want you to be thinking about how do you need to turn your page. And again, don't try to do it in one fell swoop. You're not trying to prove that you could tattoo a circle on somebody, okay? I don't know if you've seen that video. To make a nice curve, generally speaking, can be made from multiple broken lines rather than trying to do it with one solid line. It's way harder to do with one solid line. I'm pretty good at drawing, and if I draw a curve like a circle with one line, you see, I'm pretty good till about here, where that's where I start to really have to push up. And it's really hard to control that trajectory. It's actually easier to draw like that, right? Like it's easier to draw lightly in just one movement. That just gets really hard when you're drawing, you know, by trying to place it into a certain place. So it's always easier to draw with one, you know, with multiple lines than it is to try to draw one swoop with a circle. So now we can see where our circle is, right, on the bottom. And so then what we need to do is just kind of like correlate it to the circle, to the placement of the circle in the top. So there, what you're going to use is just your straight lines and draw up from those points of reference. Now, right now, we do kind of need all the points because like we're going to be trying to squeeze the oval in there, even though, you know, a lot of it will be like hidden in the end by the actual cup. You know, again, these just become markers for us so that we know where things are going to go. And then this is a bit hidden back there. That's the last one is this corner here. Lines right up with the front corner. Okay. So now we can start that process of making sure that we know, all right, so like, oh, we do need this one here. Sorry. This one. So now we kind of know that there should be a little bit of a curve in here. That's going to come down through here. Like, look at that. Look how flat that's going to be. And then it's going to come up through here. And then this is going to come down. And that's the widest part of the curve there. And then it's going to meet here. And then that will come and curve in through here. Because again, there's that coin flipping in the air, right? And it's spinning in that planar gradation and like getting to the point where we see the top and we see the bottom, but then we see the side and then it just disappears. So it's you know, this is the way in which, you know, it occurs. I've been watching The Mandalorian and Boba Fett, and they say this is the way. If you're a Star Wars fan, I hope you are also going to be completely sad with me that they brought back the guy, Christian, whatever his name is, from like Phantom Menace and Clone Wars, and the last one I don't even remember what it was that he was in as Anakin Skywalker. He's going to be in Kenobi, which I'm really sad about because I really didn't like how he played Anakin Skywalker at all. So when I heard that he was going to be in Kenobi, I don't know, I may not watch Kenobi now as a result of that. I don't know if I can stomach it. I'm not critiquing him as a person, I'm critiquing his acting, which I thought was not very good. But you know, when George Lucas is directing you, chances of you doing a good job, pretty slim, pretty slim. Okay, so here we go. So now we got the bottom and the top. Okay. And so now we kind of have an idea of where our cylinder is existing in space. Now what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take that. And I'm going to just draw the bits that I need. Okay, I'm going to go over here to the outmost part of the circle of the ellipse. And I'm going to draw that in because I need that. I come over here. I'm going to do the same thing over here, the outmost part of the ellipse. Need that. Okay. Now I'm going to trace the work I did here. Again, just making sure I don't accidentally pull that to a point because it's not going to be a point. You can see I'm using a broken line, right? I'm not trying to draw all at once. Okay. Same thing down here. Now, the closer the top and the bottom, the less extreme the angle difference between those ovals. Okay, so sometimes if you are working well without the boundaries of like where you're drawing, so you're working way beyond that 60%, you'll get like a huge distortion between that top and that bottom, and it's really going to be noticeable when you start to solidify the drawing. Okay. And then when you're ready, you can start to curve that through. Curve that. Okay. Now, the next part of this is going to be like the handle. So let's turn back this on. Let's put back on the cube. Okay, I'm going to change colors, or if you're using your pencil, just go lighter. Okay, so then if I find the center here and here and here, so we already did that, but now we've done it again. We've reestablished again. Oops, we did it again. We found the center of where the handle is. Sorry, I don't really know Britney Spears, so that's all you're gonna get. So we have like this. Okay. So now we know, now we can say, okay, well, like if we do that division there, then we've got like, okay, we've got one section, 2, 3, 4. Okay. So now we've got these 4 sections. So let's go ahead and say, all right, well, let's pull the handle out. Let's make the handle from this height to this height. Okay. So then let's go ahead and say, all right, so then first thing we need to do is just kind of figure out like, okay, so this side here should be thinner. This side here should be wider because of the perspective. So now we have this. And basically the next part, y'all, is really easy, really, which is just going all the way over to your vanishing point, picking it up and running it through there, picking it up and running it through there, and picking it up and running it through there. We don't really need the bottom because we're not going to see it. Bottom right, I mean, excuse me. Now, make things a little easier on yourself, and also so you can pick the handle up. Go ahead and extend the handle beyond sort of the parameters, like that. And then that's going to go back there. This is going to go back there, and then vertical line there. Okay. So I'm just going to retrace all that now for you on this layer, so you can see it. I'm just going to draw the bits that we're going to see. which right now is pretty much just most of what we just drew. Okay. Now, if we go back to this layer where we had all these divisions that I made, and then I'm going to go here. Okay, what's going to be a nice thickness of the handle? Okay, like how can I figure that out? Like what looks good? Well, like I think that this intersection here, like I think that looks really good. And then honestly, truth be told, I think that looks really good. So now we have like this. Okay. So now we can follow this down. And that's going to show us like we can, follow that. And it's going to show us all the way to the vanishing point where that we're going to see that top of the lower half. And I don't know, this looks like a really rad thickness right there. So let's just like translate now everything that we've drawn onto the final layer. Here to here to here. There's that. There's that. There's that. There's that. There's this. And this. And this. And this. And this. All the way down to here. And then back to there. So now there's our handle. Just erase the bits we don't need. Okay. So simple cylinder with a handle in 2-point perspective. And then just remember, if it doesn't have a handle, doesn't have writing, doesn't have any type of texture to it that needs to be seen in 2-point, then it's just going to be a 1-point perspective, because an ellipse can always be drawn in 1-point perspective as long as it doesn't have anything, like in this case, like a handle attached to it. Okay. All right. So we're going to move on now from here. We're going to talk about the egg project and we're going to talk about studies. So your studies are going to be the next thing that is due, and that's going to be due on Wednesday. And pardon me, that will be due on Thursday, since I did originally say that I wasn't going to have a class today. So I want to take that into account in case you built a schedule around that. It will be due on Thursday, the first part, and we're going to talk about that project, and we're going to talk about what that first part is next. Okay, so we've got about a little bit less than an hour left of class, so don't give up on the video yet. Okay.